In all honesty, it isn't enough just to study the number 6 million as an abstract representation of the Jews who died in the Holocaust. We need to attach 6 million faces to that number and understand entire Jewish communities who perished, their thoughts and ideas, their political affiliations, their religious orientation. Of the 16 to 17 million Jews in the world before the Holocaust, some 11 to 12 million lived in Europe, 9 million in Eastern Europe. A significant portion of those lived in Poland. Who were the Jews of Poland? Those who represent by far the greatest number of casualties during the Holocaust. The first thing to recognize is that there wasn't really a single Poland prior to the Nazi occupation. There were several Polands. There was Central Poland, also known as Congress Poland, where Warsaw was located. There was Galicia, with two capitals, Krakow and Lvov. There was Western Poland, which was part of Germany before World War I, and which Germany lost during the war. There was also Eastern Poland, also known as Kresy. It's estimated that there were about 3.5 million Jews living in Greater Poland by 1939. Ukrainians were the largest minority in Poland, followed by Jews, Germans, and White Russians. Jews were scattered everywhere across Poland and were certainly the most conspicuous. In the east, in Kresy, there were shtetls, quaint wooden communities, the likes of which were popularized in Broadway's Fiddler on the Roof. They built synagogues with a special style of craftsmanship. Of course, none remain today, all having been destroyed. Poland was home to the largest Jewish minority anywhere in the world. Some Jews worked in textile factories, but most in cottage industries. That meant that most were self-employed. Only around 20% were in agriculture, while in the general population, it was 80%. This all the more added to their conspicuousness. In general, the Jews were very urbanized, at least a third living in the large cities. In Warsaw, over 30% were Jews, some 380,000. In Łódź, 1/3 of the population was Jewish, 220,000. Many small towns in Poland were as much as 60 to 70% Jewish. 80% of the Jewish population worked in industry and commerce. Of the 3.5 million Polish Jews, about 1/3 were religious. One real question for us is, how aware were the Polish Jews of the danger facing them? Vladimir Jabotinsky, a lawyer born in Odessa, a great orator and revisionist Zionist leader, testified before the British House of Lords in 1937, before the so-called Peel Commission on Palestine, demanding that its doors be opened to Jewish immigration. He, Jabotinsky, declared, "Our demand for a Jewish majority in Palestine is not our maximum. It is our minimum. It is just an inevitable stage if only we are to go on salvaging our people." He went on, "There are certainly 3 or 4 million Jews in the East who are virtually knocking at the door, asking for admission. That is, for salvation." When we read Jabotinsky's haunting words, it certainly sounds as if the Polish Jews understood the danger. Other sources, however, suggest that they might in fact have been unaware of the Nazi threat. That's just one of the many issues scholars debate. Unfortunately, rather than heeding Jabotinsky's Jewish demand to be saved, the British tightened and virtually cut off Jewish immigration to Palestine when they issued the notorious White Paper of 1939. It declared, Jewish immigration during the next 5 years will be at a rate which, if economic absorptive capacity permits, will bring the Jewish population up to approximately 1/3 of the total population of the country. Taking into account the expected natural increase of the Arab and Jewish populations and the number of illegal Jewish immigrants now in the country, this would allow of the admission, as from the beginning of April this year, of some 75,000 immigrants over the next 4 years. Such restrictions couldn't have come at a worse time. We can also question how many would actually have gone to Palestine if the British had opened the doors. What we do know is that between the 1880s and 1920s, some 1.5 million Polish Jews emigrated to the United States. Then came the Immigration Act of 1922, which drastically restricted Jewish immigration to America. Unfortunately, there was a rise in anti-Semitism in America in the 1920s, expressing itself in a desire to keep Jews out. In a report presented by the House Committee on Immigration and Naturalization, we read, by far the largest percentage of immigrants are peoples of Jewish extraction. It goes on, if there were in existence a ship that could hold 3 million human beings, the 3 million Jews of Poland would board it to escape to America, unquote. The result? Quota laws that effectively shut off America as an avenue of escape. Consequently, even those Jews who wanted to get out of Poland ultimately had nowhere to go. In the years between the world wars, from 1919 through 1926, we have the first period in modern Polish national history, a very turbulent time. We encounter one Józef Pilsudski, a military hero who fought off the Bolsheviks and headed the PPS, the Polish National Party. Pilsudski actually restrained anti-Semitism in those days. But in 1927, a group of colonels took over, ruling up until the Nazis marched in. The thing to note about Polish Jewry is that it was at its core a very political society. In fact, the political structure of modern Israel goes back to Poland. Of course, politics breeds division, and the political divisions in Polish Jewish society caused real problems in every ghetto established by the Nazis, which means that there was hardly a great camaraderie of suffering, because nobody could agree on anything. As for Jewish politics in Poland, there were 3 main parties: Zionist, Orthodox, and the Bund, each comprising about 30% of the total Jewish population. The Zionists comprised the NMB, or National Minorities Bloc. Among them were general Zionists, moderate in tone, who taught the Hebrew language in preparation for a new life, hopefully in Palestine. There were the labor Zionists, socialist in orientation, known as Poalei Zion, workers of Zion. Among them was a gentleman who became the first prime minister of the state in Israel in 1948, David Ben-Gurion. There were the revisionist Zionists, more right-wing and militant, organized in 1925, among whom was Vladimir Jabotinsky. And we mustn't forget the religious Zionists, organized in 1903 under the banner of Poalei Mizrahi, workers of the East. But they shouldn't be confused with the traditional Jewish Orthodox Party of Poland, organized in 1912, known as Agudat Israel. Surprisingly enough, they strongly opposed Zionism, believing that only the Messiah can resurrect a new Jewish state in Palestine. They even managed to get elected to the Polish parliament, saying basically, "Leave us alone and we'll support the government against the Zionists." Then we have the Bund, organized in 1897, socialist in orientation and very anti-Zionist. The socialists weren't interested in a nation-state for Jews, and they were not excited about the idea of nationalism at all. They wanted to spread socialism around the world and across national boundaries. Jews, they felt, should be in the vanguard of that movement, not evacuating to Palestine. The Bundists developed a central Jewish organization in Poland for the care of children, Centos, where Yiddish, not Hebrew, was taught. And they also cultivated a youth movement called Zunkunft. It's clear then that a good 2/3 of the Polish Jewish population was never interested in emigrating to Palestine to begin with. As for the pillars of Zionism, there were two of them. Aliyah, a Hebrew word that literally means going up, obviously to Palestine, and the settlement, secondly, of this ancient yet Jewish land. On this, both left-wing and right-wing Zionists agreed. They saw the Jewish diaspora, the scattered Jewish population around the world, specifically in Europe, as Luftmenschen, people living off the air. Beyond these 2 points, the Zionists agreed on nothing. Far from a camaraderie of suffering, they fiercely fought each other. Everyone had to find his or her own way through the ensuing tragedy. Jabotinsky, as a revisionist Zionist, broke with Ben-Gurion and the World Zionist Organization. He created the Jewish Battalion in World War I and helped capture Palestine from the Turks. He ultimately fought his way to Palestine, where his group morphed into the militant militia called the Irgun. In the final analysis, the Polish Zionists didn't see themselves as living here and now in Poland, but in Israel. It was the youth of this movement that would one day come to the fore in the ghettos created by the Nazis. Some 180,000 Jews made Aliyah in the 1930s, the so-called Fifth Aliyah, 80% of whom were Poles. In the end, Jabotinsky put forth an evacuation plan for 1.5 million Jews to go to Palestine. The Polish government actually loved the idea, but only a fraction of that number actually made the trip. For those who did go, things improved in Palestine from the 4th to the 5th Aliyah. During the 4th Aliyah, many ended up returning to Poland, but during the 5th Aliyah, they stayed in Palestine. Those remaining in Poland have been described as a youth without a future. Of a Jewish population of 3.5 million Jews after the war, only between 20,000 and 50,000 remained. Of course, the rest is history.